Good afternoon. I'm Chris Conkle. I'm the VP of Product at Recovery Point Systems.
And I'm Jeff Judy. I'm the Disaster Recovery Chief Cloud Architect.
Thanks for taking the time this afternoon. Very quickly, Recovery Point Systems is a pure play disaster recovery and cyber resiliency provider. DR and cyber resiliency is the only thing that we do. We're passionate about delivering positive outcomes for our clients, both in testing and in actual recovery events. Ultimately, we are all about our clients and improving their recovery time objectives, or RTOs. We take a vendor agnostic approach to protecting all platforms from mainframe, power systems, x86 to private cloud, and we deliver those services in our purpose-built data centers. We were just recently and very excited to be recognized again for the 10th consecutive year as a leader in the disaster recovery space. So, unfortunately, ransomware continues to be a significant threat to businesses. We continue to see attacks that have significant negative impacts. For example, in April, we saw UK retailer Marks and Spencer suffered a cyber attack that initially disrupted their business in totality and then continued to disrupt their business into June. They expect to be fully back to normal operations in October. Another UK company, K&P Logistics, had to shutter their organization after 158 years due to a ransomware attack. They could not recover their data, and they could not afford the £5 million ransom. Ingram Micro, US company, in July suffered an attack that caused them to be unable to process orders for several days until they were able to properly restore. Ingram, I think, is somewhat of a success story because they were well positioned to be able to recover. So the statistics are a little sobering. 73% of the companies worldwide paid the ransom to try to recover their data. $9.4 million is the average cost of the data breach. And 93% of the ransomware attacks, when they go back, they target the backups, making it much more difficult to recover from these attacks.
Interesting, Marks and Spencer, that's going to play out to be about 6 months before they're fully back to operational business as usual. That's tough.
It's extremely tough, and you think about the impact of organization that's having to shutter after that period of time. The cost was to 700 employees' jobs. So if you think about it, it is really a scourge in terms of our society. So moving on, organizations, unfortunately, so on top of an increasingly difficult threat landscape, organizations are also not properly prepared. So from Gartner, 70% are poorly positioned in terms of DR, a little less cyber. 66% suffer from the mirage of overconfidence. They believe that they're more prepared than what they are. And 75% faced failures in their backups after a cyber attack. So if you think about this, Jeff, when a client comes to us, they often say, hey, I've got a disaster recovery plan. How does that actually correlate to being cyber ready? Can you speak to that?
Thanks, Chris. What we see are that cyber attacks are truly the number one disaster event. Cyber attacks have brought an evolution to traditional disaster recovery. Furthermore, you see things out there where it's a business for cyber criminals, where you might have a company that is harvesting passwords, exfiltrating data, and then they sell that off to another cyber criminal unit that actually wants to use it for malicious activities. So it's really become a democratization of destruction. Just a quick note about, or quick statistics, CrowdStrike says that with artificial intelligence, they're now seeing a 52% click-through in phishing emails. So that, just to say that the increase in speed and scale of the cyber attacks are increasing. And that's changed the landscape for a recovery event. So with a ransomware attack, you have things like unpredictability of the event. Traditionally, you can see a hurricane coming, and fires and floods are really a thing of the past as far as disaster recovery. That typically does not occur inside a data center these days. But it's unpredictable about a cyber attack. There's also a frequency of declaration. You could be have been attacked, working on recovery, and then attacked again. And there's also supply chain attacks that can happen that you may not even be aware that you have a dependency around. Again, data encryption and extortion is another factor that you have to deal with when you're dealing with a cyber attack. And then time sensitivity around the whole thing. We've seen where a client has been attacked, received a ransomware note, and they're working like crazy trying to recover, but the cyber criminals see that they're still in their environment. They can see that they're trying to recover, and they're like, hey, we're going to encrypt you further unless you pay the $5 million or $9 million. And then also the threat mitigation and removal as you're working through trying to do the recovery process. So your teams need to have these things thought out in advance, be prepared, and have the proper plan in place so that you can execute, so that you're ready to execute versus just trying to scramble in the middle of a cyber attack. So Chris, why don't you take us through recovery points approach?
Sure. So let me start. Most of things need to happen before the boom. So left of the boom. If you think about how you structure cyber resiliency, you really have this in the preparation stage, and then you have the boom, you have recovery, and you have remediation, and all of that requires planning up front. If you think about from a cybersecurity perspective, layered security is great, right? Firewalls, EDR, phish training all help to mitigate the risk. But as Jeff pointed out earlier, AI-based social engineering, phish attacks make it so really it is a question of when, not if, a cyber attack is going to come. So we think about how we get you prepared from, it starts really at business continuity, disaster recovery planning. So your BCDR plan, making sure that you have a full understanding of what your inventory is, what your critical systems are, the tiering, and then layering in on top of that, because you are now in a cyber potential event, things like replication get destroyed. So you need to have a good, solid backup strategy. So that's really where immutability, where you're hardening the backups so that they can't be changed, or even potentially air gapping to tape. And then testing. Testing is absolutely critical. You want to do DR testing, potentially IR testing. And during the testing, you also start to pick up things like drift, which is the changes that happen in the production environment that may not end up in the disaster recovery plan. You're picking those things up so that you become more and more recoverable. And then we're going to talk more about this later, but threat scanning and backup validation, making sure that your backups are truly recoverable. So then you have on the recovery side, you got the boom. You now need to have the equipment, whether that be dedicated equipment or hot site equipment, but the ability to have things pre-staged and ready to go. And hopefully you have runbooks built and have the ability then to add an automation layer. Additionally, you want to have the potential for clean room where you have multiple, maybe one, maybe many isolated recovery environments that are truly network isolated, where you can bring up systems, determine whether or not they're recoverable, and potentially the cleaning exercise to have them promoted. At that point, you should be in a steady state in a DR failed over position. The final stage really is about remediation and failing back to normal operations back into your original data center. So that's our approach. And we've put that together into a package that we refer to as ransomware recovery as a service, right? We generally solution and tailor our offerings to individual clients' needs, but we put this together as a plan for having all the components necessary to cover these things. So that starts with a gap assessment where we're just trying to make a determination of maturity, then making sure you have a business continuity, a DR plan, system impact analysis, then your backup strategy, immutable backups, potentially tape air gap, your equipment, which we already talked about, whether that's dedicated or hot site failover, backup scanning and validation, vulnerability scanning inside of the clean room, Testing and validation. Again, testing to make sure that you are recoverable. Runbook management, reporting, which we'll talk quite a bit more, and then automated orchestrated recovery, like automation to make all of these things happen faster, because every minute counts when your business is down. So the perpetual cat and mouse game creates the needs for the processes and technologies to continuously evolve. The tools are increasingly engineered to provide better recovery readiness. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of these. Backup validation, which we're going to talk in detail about, leverages AI and this concept of backups, having the data that is separated from production and being able to scan them. Clean room, which we've already talked quite a bit about, but a secure and isolated environment where your IR teams can come in and test with no harm to anything in the production environment. We've talked about automation, and then testing and reporting. We're seeing more and more AI starting to creep into these tools. The backup tools now natively have, like Veeam, have anomaly detection, malware detection in them. And so we're continuing to see the development of these tools over time that helps to offset disasters, and particularly cyber. The speed at which a cyber AI attack requires comparable speed in AI-based recovery. So backup validation. So I think we've established that backup strategy is critical to cyber resiliency. And the next level into this is making sure that you're able to validate. So our clients that fall under our managed services, we do a quarterly test that we're picking up drift. We're making sure that the environment is recoverable, but we're also making sure that the backups are recoverable. But we also have an additional process that has this automated. And so that process, it takes our backup copies that we have that are off-site to the production environment. We rehydrate them. We turn on the VMs. We scan them for malware and indicators of compromise. We report on any anomalies, and we also provide a recoverability score in order for you to have confidence that your backups are recoverable. This process has zero impact on the production environment, can be run on a defined schedule. Generally, that defined schedule is either the client's defined RPO or inside of the dwell time of a ransomware attack. Some interesting statistics around this too is clients that have utilized this tool, 82% of them have found some level of compromise inside of their backups, whether that be keyloggers or malware or reconnaissance tools. This tool can be very valuable potentially in stemming the tide of a ransomware attack before it occurs. So Jeff, can you take us through Clean Room?
Thanks, Chris. So I'd like to say that with ransomware, cyber attacks being the number one disaster recovery event, CISOs, they must start to embrace the breach, because as Chris alluded to, despite the best perimeter security, the odds of bad actors getting in are still very high. So how can you ensure that you can quickly recover? How can you test your recovery in advance to make sure that your plans are going to work? Part of that process is Recovery Point's Clean Room. And the critical uses around a clean room are cyber recovery testing, forensics analysis, and production failover. If you want to dive into that a little bit, cyber recovery testing is building your disaster recovery plan around what steps you need to take to perform the recovery, which are involved around running a forensics analysis and ensuring that your systems are clean before you promote them back into production. And so, as you work through a clean room use cases, the forensics analysis piece is where you need to understand, what really is a forensics analysis. You can get into it with your third-party security tooling to run scans and understand where maybe your breach indicator of compromise has occurred. And of course, with the clean room, you can do production failover as well. So it's really a comprehensive disaster recovery solution that you need to put in place. It's not So the next slide here is going to show you really that recovery clean room is not just a stack of servers and a network switch or a firewall. It's a process that you have to put in place around that infrastructure. And one of the key factors there is that you have to have off-site backups. Many times what you may see is that a replication solution will replicate the malware, the encrypted systems, and so you have no recovery points to fall back to from a replicated solution because it's already replicated the stuff that's happened, and you have to fall back or you have to utilize your backups. So you follow a 3-2-1 rule. It's a mantra of Veeam, and keep one copy of your backups off-site. Keep it at our data center, recovery points S3, immutable storage, or one of our other repositories that you can land that backup in. And that's really your last line of defense, your lifeline to bring your business back online. After that, you want to build runbooks around the recovery process. So understand all of the teams need to be doing different things in parallel. You want to build runbooks around every configuration detail that needs to happen and the steps that need to be taken. Because once you have those things detailed and defined within a runbook, you can apply your recovery automation around that. We love using automation. It helps us scale and achieve just an accuracy level around recovery time objectives for clients. That's been very good. So we want to automate as much of the workflow processes as possible because obviously recovering or speeding up the recovery process will save your company time, money, and a lot of headaches during a cyber event. And then build in the security scanning processes into this recovery service. So there's many tools out there. Veeam is very good at this, where they have already built-in tooling that can run security scans on your backups. So you can build in the process into the workflow where we're recovering you from a backup onto the isolated recovery environment, run the security scanning processes. Maybe that's a built-in from one of the backup vendor tools, or you can use a third party like SentinelOne or CrowdStrike. But it's a critical piece to be able to discover where the indicator of compromise was, what vulnerabilities are still in existence around the systems you're recovering, and then be able to patch those, remediate, clean the systems before you promote them out into a production state. It's very critical, actually, because if you need to know what recovery points are good, and what was the blast radius of the attack, what systems were infected, and many times your production site is down. One of the first steps that are taken when a cyber attack occurs is isolation. Your network team will start to shut down networks to halt the lateral movement of the attackers. So really, your production environment's down, and you need that alternate clean room, isolated environment to bring systems back up in. And of course, reporting is of the utmost importance because you need to understand. That across all teams, what is the status? Where do you of your workflows, and at what point are you in the recovery stage? And to that end, for reporting and automation, Recovery Point uses automation and orchestration through our managed recovery services to build a complete recovery solution for our clients. We build out runbooks based on per application, per system, and then apply the automation that needs to occur for the systems to come back online. Automation helps to reduce recovery time. It's going to reduce your human error, and it just builds a programmatic process that's repeatable and that you can properly measure against. Many times we see clients that really don't have a good measuring stick to understand how good their DR recovery test plan is. So building these processes and automation around it helps you to understand where your gaps are. Another thing we offer is the resiliency console. So it's our own developed tool. We see hundreds of tests a year, and so we have many hours just wrapped around disaster recovery, service delivery. And as Chris said in the beginning, it's the only thing that we're focused on. We're all about the RTO. And so we built the resiliency console, which is a tooling that allows you to build your disaster recovery plan or your cyber resiliency plan, put in the dependencies between systems and applications, as well as build in collaboration between multiple teams. Teams are working on different platforms, different systems, running in different directions, especially during a cyber event. So you must have a tool like the Resiliency Console to be able to tie it all together, to make sure all teams are rowing in the same direction and understand at what point are you in your recovery process. Another part of the Resiliency Console is being able to report on your status during an event, as well as post-event follow-up, maybe post-test follow-up with some reporting to be able to review what your key performance indicators are showing you across your recovery architecture. Because when you have this type of reporting that you can produce to your management, to your executive team, you're able to show the investments that you've made in your people and processes and technology are driving a real financial savings for your disaster recovery plan. Also, these metrics ensure that your recovery plan works as you would expect. So there's times where you're running through a plan that you've put in place, but all of a sudden you realize that you completely missed an application, a critical application to your company. So the plan is going to show you, hey, we totally missed a recovery time objective because we were missing systems or backups or applications. So they're going to help you find those gaps in your recovery plan. I think that's going to wrap us up, Chris.
Thanks, Jeff. So hopefully you guys have found this content to be useful. We would be happy to work with you to build out your cyber or disaster recovery solution. If you're interested in our free ransomware readiness discovery session, please click on the QR code, and we appreciate your time.